Hola amigos de Wine News TV, les invito a conectar conmigo y con mis invitados en Wine News TV On The Go, un podcast que a su vez es un espacio donde aprenderás sobre el mágico mundo del vino a través de invitados de todas partes del mundo que nos contarán sobre sus proyectos para obsequiarnos de forma embotellada música, fuego y leones, como decía el gran maestro argentino Jorge Luis Borges en su poema Soneto al Vino. Bueno, mi gente, estamos en la tercera parte de la entrevista de lo que para mí ha sido una mañana que jamás olvidaré aquí en Dr. Konstantin Frank en los Finger Lakes. Como saben, hablé con mi amigo Eric Bass, ya de Cool Climate Wines, que eran vinos blancos y un rosado. Luego hablamos de unos espumantes maravillosos, unas burbujas. Y ahora tengo el honor, la posibilidad, y para compartirla con ustedes, qué mejor que estar grabándolo con el presidente de la empresa, el señor Fred Frank, nieto de Konstantin Frank. Estamos aquí en un edificio construido en el 1886, que es una maravilla, donde hacen catas para clientes exclusivos y para la prensa. Now we're switching on to English. Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. I was telling you a while ago that it was through Dr. Konstantin Frank and other wineries, but mainly Dr. Frank, that I came across the Finger Lakes regions for the first time more than a decade ago, starting to hear about it. My palate as a consumer began to evolve around that time when I started drinking wine and becoming enamored or illusioned or enthused. My wife would say obsessed with wine. Mm-hmm. About 20 years ago, I was very much into big, bold, sturdy Napa wines, wines from Spain, super Tuscans from Italy. And now I have a saying that I'm drinking like a señora, like an old lady. I'm drinking cooler climate, less alcohol, less concentrated fruit. And I'm looking for versatility. I'm looking for nuance. And I have become a huge fan of this neck of the woods, so to speak. And I was talking to Eric about the fact that you don't have to go all the way to Austria or to Germany to taste cool climate wines of the highest quality. For me, it's an honor to be talking to you. I would like to speak a little bit about your grandfather, Dr. Konstantin Frank, and about where the company is now vis-a-vis when he started it. I mean, this was established in 1962. We're in 2024. Maybe, if you don't mind, tell us a bit about how it all started and where it is. It's a very big question, but I want to get a bird's eyes view of how the company has evolved.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for visiting. We're here in a bit of a snowstorm, but it's nice and warm inside. So it is a great story. My grandfather, Dr. Konstantin Frank, was a PhD in viticulture. That's a grape growing science. And his thesis was techniques for growing Vitis vinifera, the European varieties, in a cold climate. So he had the perfect background coming to New York back in the 50s, the early 50s, from Europe. And he heard that the local grape industry here was not able to grow the vinifera. They were only growing the native grapes like Concord and a few French hybrid grapes.
So they were not allowed because it was legally prohibited, or they didn't know how?
They tried unsuccessfully. Okay. So this goes all the way back to Thomas Jefferson.
Oh, wow.
He was ambassador to France. He loved French wines, Bordeaux wines. He got cuttings from his friends in France, planted them at his estate in Virginia, and within a few years they died. And this was what happened with many attempts after him. And so one of the reasons for failure was a pest that lives in the soil called phylloxera. And this is a little root louse that is native to the entire eastern United States. So from Maine all the way down to Georgia, in the soils we have this pest lurking. And unfortunately, the European varieties never evolved to be resistant to this pest. So if you planted an own-rooted vinifera vine, within a few years, the roots would be eaten off. So Konstantin knew that the wild vines that you see growing along the roads here must have evolved a way to be resistant to this pest, or how could they be growing wild, right? So he took this natural approach, took cuttings from the wild vines, grafted them onto the European vine, and thus was able to grow the vinifera in New York, and also consulted with other vintners in other eastern states. Now, the reason Konstantin knew that this technique worked is because he helped save the European vineyards with this technique. So with the turn of the steamship, the crossing of the Atlantic was short enough that these little bugs survived in nursery stock or whatever by accident. And once they reached Europe, they spread like wildfire through France, through Germany. And so Konstantin was among the scientists that helped first save the European vineyards using this technique. So if you were to walk through our vineyards, you would see a bulge just above the soil. And that bulge is the union, the graft union, or the marriage between these two different varieties. So everything below the bulge are the Native American rootstock to protect us from the native pest. And everything above the bulge is the European stock, the trunk, the leaves, the canes, and so forth. So the quality is the same as if it was own-rooted. However, now they're resistant to this pest. And this is a total natural approach. So if early attempts in California, when this bug spread to California, they tried to inject the soil with dangerous pesticides, methyl bromide, which is very toxic. And here with our steep slopes and these pristine lakes, it would have caused damage to the environment.
Incredible how you were going all the way back to one of the founding fathers, and how Thomas Jefferson was successful in everything he attempted in his life, but he failed at wine because he didn't know how.
Right.
He was able to draft the Declaration of Independence and become president, everything that he did, but the capacity to grow vinifera eluded him.
That's true, yes. So unfortunately, it was that way for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Until Konstantin came on the scene. The reason why this is so important is because our climate here in the Finger Lakes is a cool climate, and it's ideal for the Northern European wine grapes.
Mm-hmm. And can you touch a bit before we continue on the climate, the area in the world where we're at? Dr. Konstantin Frank, your grandfather, obviously a scientist, a man that's regarded all over the world, not only the wine world, but the whole world, as a pioneer of sorts. How was he as a man, your grandfather?
He was tough. So nothing fazed him. And when he was told it couldn't be done, that was a challenge for him.
What year was he born?
Excuse me.
Don't worry about it.
He was born in 1899 on the 4th of July, so he viewed himself as a true American patriot.
Incredible. And when did he leave this planet? When did he pass?
Oh, he passed when he was 85 years old.
1984, that would have been.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when you say that he was tough, is that you couldn't say no to him? He kept on trying, right?
That's right. He wasn't like normally a normal person. If you're told by experts can't be done, you give up and try something else. But he knew from his work in Europe that it could be done, and he changed the industry. But the reason that this is so important is because our climate here is ideal for these Northern European wine grapes. So Riesling is our #1 variety, but other cool climate varieties like Gewürztraminer, Gruner Veltliner, sparkling wines, basically all the grapes that grow in Germany, Austria, and northern France. And because of the cooler climate, we have a natural higher acidity in the wines, which creates wonderful balance. And the alcohol levels are moderate. And this is becoming a bigger factor with global climate change. Many of our traditional hot climate regions are experiencing very high alcohol levels.
Yeah.
Napa, Spain, Australia. So in our case, because we're on the northern fringe of growing grapes, it was actually positive for us, gaining 1% on the alcohol.
Yeah, because now your wines are totally drinkable, and other parts of the world are making wines that taste like port or dessert wines, which are incredibly ripe, and then you have two or three glasses and you have a hangover the next day. These wines that I've tasted today, the bubbles, the one that's an homage to your grandmother, that Riesling, it was just world class quality. And then the Chardonnay that's just a little bit of oak, it's gorgeous as well. In terms of visibility, notoriety, the recognition factor that you nowadays is very important in a world of brands and in a world of so much competition. Where would you say the company is visible, or the Finger Lakes as a whole? Because you as a family are sort of the patriarchs here, if you will. The Mondavis were in the west, the Franks here on the east, and that's not something that you are saying. There's something that I am saying, just to be clear here. Where do you think the Finger Lakes in general is today, vis-a-vis when your grandfather passed in the mid '80s?
Well, it's been a renaissance. I wish Constantine could have seen, the fruits of his labor. But when he was alive, there weren't many vinifera grown. It was a bit of a struggle to convince the industry that the quality was the way forward. So it took many decades for local growers and vintners to follow his lead.
So right now, if he was able to see this, and somewhere in the afterlife, for those of us who are believers, he could probably look down and think I was right.
Oh, yes, I think he'd be very proud of his family now in the fourth generation, continuing his legacy, and also the industry growing to several hundred wineries now in the region. When he started, there were 6.
Wow. Wow, that's incredible. Um, Before we go, I want to talk a little bit about, because you've seen this for so many years. Well, Riesling, and thanks to your great grandfather, put the Finger Lakes in the map. I've heard and I've tested and I've sampled this personally, the Cabernet Franc, and we're tasting an unbelievably good, savory, delicate, very much like a Chenin, like a Chinon or a Loire Cabernet Franc from France. Right now, we're tasting the 2021 Cab Franc from Dr. Konstantin Frank. This is delicious, has 12% alcohol. This is the types of wine that were made 50, 60 years ago, and these are the wines that I like to enjoy nowadays. So Cab Franc, a lot of people have or are of the opinion that it's the red varietal, that it's making great or getting great accolades all over the world, and bubbles. What else you think is going to be the talk of the town, so to speak, in the coming years from this region? What do you see potential? I tasted a delicious Gruner with Eric a little while ago. I've been hearing some people say that Albarino, I was in Galicia, where Cradle of Albarino in Spain 4 months ago. In terms of reds, whites, what else do you think is going to end up gelling here?
Well, that's a good question. Riesling will always be number one for us.
Yeah.
It makes up about 60% of our production. Whites make up 80%, so we're only 20% in reds. However, there are some exciting reds that we're working with such as Blaufränkisch, it's an Austrian red.
Mm-hmm. Kept Francos in Hungary.
Cape Franc.
Hungary, yeah. Hungary.
There's also, and the Loire Valley, and of course in Bordeaux as a blender. Um, and then we have Saperavi, which is a Georgian wine grape. So we're always experimenting with different varieties, but typically the cooler climate grapes do best here. Albarino, although I love tasting it from Spain, would not grow well here because it's from a hot climate.
Yeah.
So each region should do what they do best, so to speak, and in our case, it's going to be the Northern European wine grapes. I think the next big buzz for the region will be sparkling wines.
I agree with you.
We're here at our sparkling cellar that was originally built in 1886 with local field stones, has very deep cellars, ideal for the long-term aging of the sparkling wines. And this was a project that my dad, Willie, started back in the 80s because he felt the region had great sparkling potential, getting back to the cooler climate. And so he started out by growing the classic Champagne grapes, which are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier. He was the first to grow Pinot Meunier in this region. And although the French don't talk about it much, it is, when you look at the acreage, it's an important part of Champagne, Pinot Meunier. So, and then he hired a sparkling winemaker.
This is your father, Willie Frank.
My father, Eric Bauman, to take over when his health was failing. And Eric had worked at Jay, which is a famous sparkling winery in Sonoma. And so Eric has a really good vision of the potential for sparkling wine in California and here. He's originally from this area, and that's what brought him back. And he agrees that, here we have the higher natural acidity. In California, they had to add acid, because it was a warmer climate. So if you look at our juice chemistry coming out of the press, it's almost identical with the numbers that you would get from a French champagne.
Yeah, it rhymes on Epernay.
Everything, the bricks, the acidity, the pH, it's almost identical. Now, the flavor profile will be somewhat different, obviously, because there's different region, but I would say it's the closest to French champagne within the United States, and so that's something that I think we're getting fantastic ratings on these sparkling wines, and with our deep cellars, we can age them the same amount of time as a French champagne, 4 years, for example, on the yeast, and it's all done méthode champenoise,
which is expensive to produce, and your Blanc de Blancs for $40, I was saying, destroys a lot of the bubbles in California made in the Champenois style, because they don't have the elegance, the finesse, the acidity, that very delicate brioche note that feels to be natural instead of manufactured. The Blanc de Blancs that I had today is the best sparkler that I've had in a long time. That is from outside of Champagne, Mr. Frank.
But it's a great value when you look at the champagne prices.
Yeah, of course, for sure.
They've gone up tremendously over the years. So these wines are a nice alternative to French champagne in that they present great values, but at a very high quality.
Yeah, and your rosé, the one that I had, which is a blend of 5 grapes. In Puerto Rico with Serrayes, we do have the salmon run. We don't have the one that I had earlier today, which was fantastic. I think rosé is in a category of its own. I'm trying to make arrangements to come back in June for the rosé soirée, and it's perfect for our climate. I always tell my friends in Puerto Rico and the people who tune into my recordings and my channels, because of our heavy Spanish influence, we do tend to drink a lot of big, bold reds. in 90
Right.
degrees in the Caribbean.
But
So
I think the seafood that you have in Puerto Rico and also in Florida is ideal for our whites, sparkling wines, rosé wines, because again, they have a nice crisp acidity,
yeah,
they have moderate alcohol.
yeah,
They're ideal food wines,
hmm
particularly with lighter dishes like fish and seafood.
exactly.
So I think they really complement that cuisine very nicely.
And that's part of the reason why I'm here as well, to tell some of the people who follow or who tune in or who trust my palate that 3.5 hours by plane from Puerto Rico, you reach JFK. And in New York City, you drive 5 hours and you get to an incredible area that produces world quality wines. Not only produces world quality wines, but it's also gorgeous. I mean, a lovely place to visit. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh,
I
thank you for
appreciate
visiting.
this. It's an honor. I am planning on coming back. I've seen Megan, your daughter, all the things
Yes.
that she's done for the company in terms of being very active on social media. Now that we're in an age where you have to be out there to be seen, she's a great communicator. I see content that she did
Yes.
with Matt from V is for Vino. I
Mhm.
have something that I'm gonna do with him in the near future. Thank you for your time, sir. It's been an honor. I
Oh,
want to
we're
toast
honored.
with you
Cheers. Thank you
with
so
this
much
Cab
for
Franc. That's
visiting.
delicious. It's been fantastic,
Thank
sir.
you.
Looking forward to coming back. Gracias, mi gente, por su sintonía. Acabo de hablar con el presidente de la empresa, el nieto de Dr. Konstantin Frank, Fred Frank, el padre de Megan, que en este momento está a cargo de la empresa. Saben que estos vinos llegan a Puerto Rico con Serrayes. Búsquenlo y vengan a visitar. Están a 3 horas y media en avión de Puerto Rico a JFK, luego 1 hora, hora y 15 hasta llegar aquí, desde JFK hasta Rochester. Y por supuesto, ustedes que me siguen en Connecticut, en Nueva Jersey, en Filadelfia, en New York, móntense en el carro y lleguen hasta aquí porque es una experiencia memorable. Gracias por su sintonía. Recuerden que en el mundo del vino lo importante no es el destino, la meta, sino el viaje o el recorrido una copa a la vez. Será hasta la próxima. Adiós. Este fue el episodio de hoy. Recuerda dejarnos una reseña para que nos ayudes a crecer, suscribirte y recomendarnos con tus amigos amantes del vino. No importa cuán avanzado estés en el recorrido de enamorarte de aquello que decían sobre el vino. Son uvas transformadas en poesía. Aquí hay espacio para todos. Salud y como siempre, dale share.